My name's Paul Wyrwoll, and I'm Managing Editor of the Global Water Forum. I'm speaking today with Dr. David Zetland, water economist, founder of the Aquanomics blog, and author of the new book, Living with Water Scarcity. Today I'm going to talk to David about some of the key themes in his recent book. So, hello David, and thanks for taking the time to speak with me.
Thanks, Paul. Good afternoon where you are, and good morning to people where I am.
So one of the key discussions in your book regards appropriate water pricing. So a bit of a simple question to start with. What do you think is the right price of water, and how do consumers know that they're paying it?
Right, so the price of drinking water from our tap water or drinking water services is invisible to many people. If you rent an apartment, you may not see your water bill. For many homeowners, it's hard to understand sometimes because you get your bill in terms of cubic meters or hundreds of cubic feet in the United States. And the price you pay, you would expect, would reflect the cost of service. And in most parts of the world, that's all it's supposed to reflect. It's supposed to reflect the cost of service because most water services are provided at a break-even or a non-profit basis. If it's a private water utility that's being regulated, they have a regulated profit. So you think, okay, I'm paying my bill. Is that the right price to pay? And that would be true if the water utility can continue to deliver drinkable quality water to you into the indefinite future. The price would be too low if the water utility is not doing the maintenance or not running safety operations that it should because it doesn't have enough money, or it's not extending the network to neighborhoods that need service because they just added new houses, or the price is not the right price if the water that you're using is being used up, in the sense that there's not going to be water in the ground or in a reservoir in the future because the water's too cheap. So you might be paying your bill and you might be seeing the water come out of your tap, but you may not know if the price is right, if those factors are actually going to be a problem.
And so you mentioned this issue in terms of the price not being right, looking to the future and resources. So being from Australia, drought can be quite a big issue here. And one of the things that I think people find very strange is that when we have a drought and we have extreme water scarcity, we're still flushing drinking water down the toilet. So what should be the right price when there is a shortage of water in the dams?
Wow, that's a great question. So the first thing about flushing drinking water down the toilet is that sometimes that's actually not a problem because the drinking water is recovered in the wastewater treatment plant and it can actually be recycled back for reuse. That's happening in more and more places. But on the other hand, if you don't have a lot of water around and there's a drought and you are flushing the toilet, I don't know, too much, according to somebody, then yes, it's a good idea to flush less or take a shorter shower, or especially stop watering your garden outside, which is, I think most Australians are aware of, but a lot of Americans are not. So in that sense, you don't use the water that is in the reserve because you might need that tomorrow. You need to decide that you're going to do that sometimes because the water utility can't raise its prices very quickly sometimes. In my opinion, as an economist, they should raise the price because people who see a higher price will use less water. But sometimes there's a lot of regulatory and legal barriers to raising prices, and they can't raise the price. So you have to actually you have to know that you're supposed to do your good deed as a citizen and use less. There's no price signal to help you out.
And if it was possible to overcome those regulatory barriers, how do you think that would work in terms of transmitting the price signal to consumers to use less water in times of drought?
That would be fairly easy in terms of setting new prices. As consumers, we are used to seeing the prices go up and down. You know, strawberries in summer are cheap. Strawberries in winter are expensive. Gasoline, when there's an oil disruption because of war in the Middle East, goes more expensive. So we drive less, or we say, wow, gas is more expensive. Prices go up and down. When airplane tickets go up and down, we decide we're not going to go on a holiday so far away. So we understand price signals all the time. And if the price of water goes up, meaning the price that you pay per unit of water goes up, then naturally you'll want to use less. Some people will not use less, and some people will use radically less water, but higher prices help people understand they should use less water. And let me inject one thing here, that your water bill is traditionally made of two components. There's a fixed component, a monthly service charge, which doesn't change. It's every month. It's to pay for the pipes in the network. And there's a variable component, which is the charge for water, which depends on how much water you use. So I'm talking about raising the price of the water you use, not necessarily your monthly water bill.
And speaking about raising prices, and you said that some people will choose to use a lot less water, and some households perhaps won't. Of course, we need a certain amount of water for our daily consumption in terms of water, in terms of drinking water, food preparation, and other essential uses as well. Now, there might be some households which couldn't afford to pay a higher price for the water that they really need. So is there a danger there that charging households higher prices for water in times of scarcity could actually have a really bad impact upon the poor?
It's a great question, and it's a difficult question. If you can find the poor households, which requires good record keeping, and you would say we're going to charge you less for water, then that would probably be the easiest solution to this problem. In most parts of the world, including most developed countries, that's difficult. Then you have to say, if you lower the price of water, and usually water will be somewhere between, let's say, $1 and $5 a cubic meter for water. What's a cubic meter? 1,000 liters. So you're paying for roughly a dollar, let's say, you're going to get 1,000 liters of water, or 200 liters of water, a lot of water. That's the price that actually is cost effective right now. If you lower that price and say, I'm going to give you 1,000 liters of water for 50 cents, I don't know if it's going to make a huge difference to most people, even to poor people in developed countries. In developing countries, the problem they have is they don't usually have water service at all. So if you lower the price of water for drinking water, for tap water, that water is not going to the poor people in slums. It's traditionally going to, or usually going to, richer people who have piped connections in the middles of cities. So that's ends up not working because the lower price is not getting to the poor people. So the question can get, and the answer can get very complicated. It depends on the situation. But the short answer is that number one, it's not the best thing to do to not automatically the best thing to do to try and lower the price of water to poor people. And number two, if you were to lower the price, it might not be much lower as far as what those poor people can pay, because a dollar or two per 1,000 liters is still quite cheap.
And you spoke a bit there about developing countries and poor people in developing countries. There's been a lot of discussion in recent years about this idea of the basic human right to water, and criticism of the support by multilateral institutions and donor countries of private utilities in developing countries which are actually charging the poor for water services provision. What do you think about this idea of a basic human right to water, and do you think it's consistent with the idea of extending water service provision to people who don't have it now?
Oh, well, another big, deep question. So the first thing is it's great to have a human right to water. And the problem is, how do you... the first thing is, the thing to talk about is that a right to water, a human right to water, like a human right to food or shelter, which are also existing human rights, recognized by international institutions, that requires money to deliver the water. So you have to say, okay, here's a human right, and who's going to pay? Now, because the people who are poor also have a right, by definition, they're not supposed to pay. So the money has to come from the government, basically. And the government may not put the money on the table. So now you have a human right that's not being funded. Or you have a human right which is a law, but you're in a country where the law doesn't mean anything because the police are corrupt and the politicians are corrupt and so on. So the implementation ends up being tricky. if you say we're going to charge poor people for water, or people in general for water, even though it's a human right, then you're contradicting the whole idea of a human right. Even though payment for service is a well-recognized exchange in developing countries. And the most obvious example of that is mobile phone service, where very, very poor people have mobile phones, or they share mobile phones or whatever, but they're paying their money to use a mobile phone. Those people clearly understand the idea of cost and benefit. They pay their money, they get the benefit. They could do the same thing for water if they could get drinkable water. But maybe they're being prevented from paying for water because it's supposed to be free for them. So this is a very difficult a clash between ideology, which is a human right, or our best wishes as humans, which is to give people this water, and reality, which is that it takes money to deliver the water. And if you don't have any money, someone's going to have to come up with it. And if they don't care about coming up with it, then you have an empty right. So that's kind of how things fall apart with this human rights.